Everybody to today's webinar. This is a webinar for Cybowall Solution from CYBONET. With me today is Sinan Retkin, if I pronounced that right.
Yep.
He is from CYBONET, based in Israel. And what we want to do today is to show you and run you through a demo of what Cybowall Solution is. So I'll hand it over to Sam, and he will continue with a short presentation and a demo of the product. Any questions you guys have, you could answer or send us an email. Details will be provided at the end of the webinar. Perfect.
Okay, thank you, Nicholas. Hello, everyone. My name is Sion, as Nicholas said, and I'm going to take you through the presentation and demo of Cybowall. Now, just to give you a little background before we start, the cybersecurity market is made up of three main segments. You have the pre-attack tools, the during-attack tools, and the post-attack tools. Some of the examples of the pre-attack tools would be vulnerability assessment tools, pen testers. During-attack tools are the main bulk, the main segment, which would be antiviruses, firewalls, IDS and IPS, SIEM, anything that monitors and reacts to a breach or a hack. And the post-attack tools are forensics and incident response tools. Now, what we aim to do with Cybowall is to provide capabilities that exist in each of the three segments. Now, if I would focus on the main pillars or the main features that Cybowall has, then we could talk about network visibility, because if you don't know what you have, you won't know what to protect. Vulnerability management. Basically, you have to know what weaknesses and vulnerabilities exist on your systems in order to prevent an attack and to mitigate the risk. And breach detection, meaning that you will be alerted and Cybowall will detect and alert you on any breaches. Now, let's talk about the threat landscape a bit. Just a few words about CYBONET. We've existed since 2002. We have several products, but today we're going to focus on Cybowall. If you have any questions and so forth, you can always contact us. Okay. Now, several years ago, we started to analyze our existing customers. Many of them are in the SMB market, small to mid-sized companies, up to 1,000 hosts, and we found several problems there. Now, the problems focus around the fact that most of these companies don't have a budget that allows them to have a basic cyber attack response plan. They usually don't have in-house security professionals, and they don't have most of the tools that would allow them to protect themselves in a more efficient manner. Now, as you can see on your screen, SMBs face the same threats as enterprise companies. And the problem is that, as I said, they have fewer resources. So it's harder for them to react and to, well, protect themselves from these threats. Now, it takes a long time to recover from a cyber attack, SMBs even more. Again, usually budget issues. And latest research, I actually read a research paper last week, says that over 80% of the attacks, or hacks if you want to call them that, in 2018 have been against SMB companies. Food for thought. Okay, now we're going to start talking about capabilities that Cybowall has, and then we're going to focus on exactly where or how they exist inside Cybowall, and then we're going to do a demo. So let's start with the IDS capabilities. Well, IDS, intrusion detection systems, are intended to detect any type of breach and to alert the admin or main user of the system of these things. What Cybowall does is we take a copy of all the traffic, inbound, outbound, internal traffic, based on a mirror port that's configured, and analyze all the information, including, of course, the packets themselves. Anything that's abnormal, suspicious, and so forth will alert the admin of the system, and we can do this without interfering with the organization's operations. Naturally, the information that we collect is encrypted and protected so as not to reveal the information to any potential malicious attacker. But IDS themselves aren't enough. An IDS is a passive device. It just detects the breaches or possible breaches and alerts the admin. But to truly protect yourselves, you need something that would respond automatically. Additionally, IDS systems are prone to false positives, meaning that these systems will detect issues, but sometimes the issues aren't actually issues. It could be traffic between systems, for example, a host inside the network contacting a backup system in the cloud. Now, this could be detected as an information leak, but in reality, this is something that the organization knows and accepts. All these things, by the way, can be configured and customized in Cybowall in order to prevent false positives in the future. Now, network traps or honeypots are, or I view them as spider webs. You can see the icon that we put in the presentation. If an attacker approaches, probes, touches a honeypot, similar to a spider web, it will alert the spider, and in the same manner, it will alert the admin of the system. The main idea of a honeypot or network trap is to draw the attacker in so he or she will approach the honeypot rather than a critical asset inside the organization. It will, a honeypot will immediately alert the breach, and you will be able to react accordingly. But again, a network trap itself is not enough. It just will only react if an attacker approaches it, if it does something, if the attacker identifies the system as a honeypot, he or she will naturally avoid it. So we need additional systems or additional features. Now, in my past roles in my career, I also performed pen testing. One of the most important things that an organization can do in order to protect themselves is to, well, mitigate or remediate vulnerabilities. And to do this, you have to know what you have. So Cybowall continuously monitors and scans the assets, the hosts in the organization, in the networks, and allows you as the user to receive information regarding these vulnerabilities, and includes, of course, remediation recommendation according to the vendor-supplied information. Again, this is not enough. You usually need let's call it a subject matter expert who will be able to analyze the information displayed. It doesn't mean you need a security professional with Cybowall. I'm currently talking about general vulnerability assessment tools. And the problem is that, as I said earlier, most of the SMB organizations don't have an employee like that. So many times, with vulnerability assessment tools, the vulnerabilities can be detected as false negatives or false positives and so forth. Now, most organizations have multiple security tools, and the problem is that you have multiple tools to manage. That's why SIEMs were developed, a tool that will allow organizations to collect all the information from multiple sources and receive them in one single dashboard. But a SIEM itself, of course, is not enough. You usually need a subject matter expert in order to go over the things, and that is one of the downsides of the system. Let's see what all these features are, or how all these features are reflected and exist inside Cybowall. So before we do that, let's see what most SMBs have in their security stack. So they usually have an email security solution, something that will filter out spam and malicious emails, antiviruses, VPNs for remote access, next generation firewalls to try to prevent access by well, people we don't want to get in, web application firewall, cloud security if you're working in the cloud, and remote monitoring and management. The advantages with these tools are usually they're affordable, not too expensive, and you can manage them with your in-house resources, which are usually the IT professionals and so forth. Now what we said is, let's add the required resources or the required tools, provide SMB organizations with a platform which includes what I'm going to show you, and bottom line, at an affordable price. So intrusion detection, if something happens, if we are breached, we would want to know about that, so we get that. Network traps, well, we want to try to draw the attackers to the honeypots, to the network traps, rather than have them attack our critical assets. Vulnerability assessment, the SIEM capabilities, asset mapping, automated response, and of course, continuous threat detection and response. Now these are usually parts of the typical enterprise security stack. The problems are they're expensive and usually require a dedicated professional. So what we did is we took these capabilities, the ones in green, and provide them as a single SMB solution on top of the standard security stack for SMBs. And what you get in Cybowall is continuous asset mapping, including port profiles, activities, and many more features. Intrusion detection, SIEM capabilities in order to collect information via the syslog protocol from all the security systems in the organization into one wall or dashboard. Network traps or honeypots, the vulnerability assessment capabilities, and something I didn't mention earlier, Malware Hunter. We can detect malware on your systems, and the good thing here is customizable. You want to add a new file type or a specific location where you believe that malware can exist, you can do this. Okay, let's access the system and see how it looks in action. This is the wall of Cybowall, the dashboard. And as you can see, there's a lot of information here. Let's start by breaking it down. So the status pane shows us high-level information regarding the status of the system and issues that we need to address, you could say, immediately. So you have information about vulnerabilities that are easily exploited or that originate from outside our network, from the internet, for example, from the hacker's garage or basement or wherever he or she is sitting and trying to attack us. So you can see that you need to fix these first. Cybowall not only detects issues and vulnerabilities regarding operating systems, but also regarding the applications installed or deployed on the hosts. So in this environment, there are 956 applications that Cybowall is monitoring. An additional advantage here is that you get a full inventory of all of the applications deployed on the hosts and, of course, on which hosts they exist, they're installed. One of the main issues that organizations have is lack of full visibility. And many organizations know more or less that they have, just saying, let's say 500 hosts, 500 IP-based devices, but they don't always know what each one is unless they access a specific system. They don't always know what applications or softwares are installed on the hosts. We can provide this information using Cybowall. Now you can see how many networks are protected, how many hosts were queried, and well, information was collected from them. If there are hosts with weak credentials, we can find this and tell you Not only that the host has weak credentials, but what they are. And you can also get information about the common vulnerable app and the critical vulnerable app. They're not always the same. If malware is found, you'll see it here, but you can also drill down, find which is the specific host that has this, have the number of malware events, and by clicking this this host, this icon of the host, you'll be able to reach the specific report regarding the malware. We'll address this in a few minutes. This pane shows us information about vulnerabilities, which I'll explain in detail in a moment. Risk assessment shows us high-level, you could call it security health information regarding the hosts. For example, is the antivirus on or off? Is it automatically updating? Is the firewall on or off? If it's on, what profile is being protected? Domain, public, private? Are there ports that are not in a specific profile? I'll dig down into the port profile term in a moment. And of course, Windows updates. Are they on or off? If they're off, or if they're on, sorry, are they automatically updating or not? And additional information, of course, regarding, I'll just show you this, wireless access. Do we have hosts where wireless access is activated? If so, we can find out why. Going back to here. Now these three panes, the Malware Hunter, lateral movement, and traffic analysis, all focus around threats in the traffic. For example, well, Malware Hunter will show you the malware. Lateral movement is actually an indication of someone approaching, probing, or attacking our network trap, our honeypot server. Traffic analysis shows us information that the IDS feature collected. And you can see that there are pretty, well, not a few attempted attacks here, but any of the other categories will also be displayed. By the way, the time frame for this is the last 24 hours. In the reports, of course, you can get information from additional time frames. Now, the network map allows us, you can either put in full screen here, I'll just scroll in a bit, and you can see information about the switches in the organization, the various VLANs or networks. Clicking on any of these opens up and displays the host that exists inside that VLAN, and you can even view the specific host information and edit that from this interface. Network visibility shows us information regarding multiple fields of information. For example, a breakdown of the operating systems that exist inside the network. Threat sources, from which country. The color here denotes the severity level of the threat. How many, or are there ports that are open, and are they acceptable or not? Green, of course, means that they're acceptable. And you have information here which tells you the breakdown of events from our various engines. Is it from the sensor, the IDS? Is it from the Malware Hunter? Is it from specific hosts, WMI research or investigation? So you can get a high-level view here and, of course, drill down into various reports. Cybowall will also score various hosts. It will give them a score based on the events that occur on those hosts. And you could see that information here, and of course drill down into specific reports about those hosts. Now I promised I would focus on vulnerabilities a bit. So if I click these three dots, I get a view. Let's open up for 25. I get a view of all the hosts that are in this specific environment or network, and a breakdown of the type of vulnerabilities. Now, as most of you probably know, almost all of the vulnerability assessment or management tools that exist in the market have a specific way to display the information. They show the various hosts, and they show the breakdown of the vulnerabilities according to the severity or CVSS score. Now, we do this as well to provide the well, familiar way to look at things, but I have to say that this way is not good enough. And why is that? Well, If you think about the way that you protect your organization, you usually do the following. You get the report regarding vulnerabilities, and then you sort the report according to the host that is most critical or most important to you as the organization, probably the domain controller. Then you look at the severity levels of the vulnerabilities that exist on that specific host and start by remediating the critical ones and then the high ones. Now, what's the problem here? The problem is that nowadays hackers are fully aware of this procedure or protocol regarding vulnerability remediation. So what they've been doing for the past 2, 3, or even up to 5 years, they've started to exploit the medium and low vulnerabilities. Now, the reality is that we, as the organization who is trying to protect ourselves, we never reach those medium and low vulnerabilities. There are so many critical and high ones, and usually so many hosts to fix, that we almost never get to remediating the medium and low ones. So we're basically wide open. So what we did in order to provide a different way to look at vulnerabilities is we display different metrics, or additional metrics, I should say. We provide metrics regarding the access source. Where can the vulnerability allow a hacker to start his or her nefarious action from? From outside our network, like I said, from wherever they're sitting and trying to hack. From an adjacent network, let's say a different VLAN or different network inside our organization. Many organizations are global, or even if they're not global, they have several office sites, so that could also be an example. This is a good example of lateral movement, or potential lateral movements between our internal networks. And local means it's local either to the specific network where it was detected or local to the specific host itself. As you can see, the most critical or most dangerous types of vulnerabilities are the network access ones. Complexity means how easy or how hard is it to perform the exploit. The easier it is, lower complexity means it's more dangerous. We need to fix these. Medium and high, of course, are harder to perform. The complexity is high, so it's not as dangerous. Privileges. What privilege level does the attacker need in order to perform the exploit? If they don't need any privileges, meaning that they can perform their work anonymously, that's the most dangerous. And of course it goes to low privileges. Let's call it standard domain user privileges, and high would be admin level. Naturally, to reach the high privilege level, to escalate the privileges, it's much more difficult than, of course, to exploit anonymous privileges. So that's why these are the most dangerous ones. And my personal favorite, user interaction. Do these exploits require the user that's inside the organization, the employee, to do anything? Click a link, run an application, perform something, interact some way with the system in order to allow the hacker to run his exploit, or not? If user interaction is required, then this risk is something that we can mitigate usually by user education, employee education. I was a CISO in a company in the past, and every month I used to gather everyone around and give them, well, you could call it a speech or a presentation regarding the dangers of clicking something without thinking about it. We're talking about, for example, phishing emails and various other types of ways that hackers can lure users to activate something or click on something, and these are exploits that are easier to mitigate. Now you can naturally sort according to the various metrics that we have here, and decide which metric is the most relevant to your organization I can tell you that in 99%, 99.9% even, of the organizations, they will use the network access metric in order to prioritize remediation of vulnerabilities. Now you can, of course, mix this with other metrics that we have here and get to the remediation policy or procedure that's most effective in your organization. Many things are, there are several things you need to take into consideration, of course. The number of employees that are in the remediation process, the number of hosts, and various other factors, of course, but you have the information you need to prioritize in Cybowall. Popping over to the risk assessment, I opened it up for a moment earlier, but it's important to focus on this for a second. You have the list of hosts, of course, and the information. Antivirus, on everywhere, perfect. It's installed and up to date. Firewall, great, on for domain public and private. But wait, oh, firewall is not enabled here. And then we can see why. Another advantage of this pane or this area is that it can validate for you as the organization if your policies are working properly. For example, of course, firewalls. Well, many organizations tell me, yeah, our firewalls are all up on all the hosts, everything's okay. But with Cybowall, we detected that the situation wasn't always correct, wasn't always true. So you get a good way to have well, in-depth visibility into your networks with Cybowall. Are the ports, are there open ports, sorry, that are in a profile or not? A port profile means it's basically a list of ports that you as the organization have designated as acceptable to be open on the various hosts. Say 80, 443, and the various other common ports. But if there's a port that is not in one of the profiles, you will be alerted about this, and then you can check why it's open. It could be, like I mentioned earlier, well, it could be something that's not, that's supposed to be in a policy, but it's not. So we're talking again about visibility, and again, it could be a potential hack. But it's also a way to minimize the attack surface. We want to try to prevent hackers from getting in any way possible, and this is one of the most common ways, closing unnecessary ports. This, of course, is our demo environment, so that's why there are things here that look dangerous, of course. For example, oh, okay, one port is detected, and it's not configured in the profile. Sorry about that. And we go again. So, as you can see, I'm going to open up for 25 again. We're looking at this one, and I can just click the name of the host and get to the protection information. But I want to know which is the open port. So if I go to network, I can see. Here we go. This is a list of ports. These are TCP ports. The green ones, you can see HTTP, PMAP, and so forth. These are acceptable ones. They are in the profile, but 5040 and 9930 are not in our port profiles. And that's why we got that yellow circle here, alerting us that there's a port that's not on a profile. Windows updates. Oh, Windows Update Service is stopped. That's not good. Here it's up and running and downloading automatically. That's perfect. This is running and downloading updates manually. Again, visibility, and of course, it gives you the information you need to be able to mitigate risk. Here you'll see, well, if there are any network access vulnerabilities that are equal or greater than the CVSS score of 7. There are some that have many vulnerabilities, but they're not network access vulnerabilities, like this one. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, wireless access. Now, if I want to take a look at the information that we have regarding well, what Cybowall collects, let's start with generic. I just clicked on the host name and I get this pop-up where I can see operating system, architecture type, 64 or 32-bit, PowerShell version. This is very important because hackers can exploit hosts using PowerShell, and if the version is older, that means it's not as up to date and of course more at risk. When was the last time we contacted and queried the machine? If there were failed logons are an indication, a possible indication, sorry, of potential hacks. Network, well, MAC address of the network card, the MAC address provider or vendor, you could say, and so forth. Basically, the focus should be on the open ports. Hardware, well, who's the vendor, processor, and you get the raw information which can tell you a lot more regarding the specific host. Software, you get the full inventory, including, of course, versions of the software deployed on that specific host. Vulnerabilities. So for each, you can see that there, in this instance, software vulnerabilities, you can see that you have information regarding the vulnerability itself and also the recommended remediations according to the vendors and, of course, industry standards in the vulnerability assessment field. And protection gives us the information that we saw basically in the risk assessment pane, but specific for this host. Antivirus, we're using Windows Defender here, where the path to it, domain, the firewall and domain public and private settings, and Windows updates. Okay, let's dive a bit deeper. Now let's go to look at the network view. The network view shows us the various hosts that exist in our network with a breakdown of Windows hosts and other hosts, anything that's not Windows. You could see clicking on any of these will show the same information we saw a moment ago. Well, the same, I should say, a screen. Information, of course, is different according to the hosts. And we can also get that from here to each his own, you know, it's basically if however you want to use the system. You can see if the host is on or is up or down, if it's shut down or turned on. You can also see it if you have port profile violations from this screen. You can perform a lot of filters over the system. You can see here. Now, if I take a peek at other hosts, you can see we detect if a system is a switch, a host is a switch, remote management system, printer, and so forth. So you get a lot of visibility here. Well, I showed you the network map, so let's pop ahead to forensics. Here you get information, full information regarding the various engines that we have, sensors IDS, the Malware Hunter, the network traps or honeypots, WMI process investigation checks the machines themselves using the WMI protocol or infrastructure, and if there's any DHCP spoofing. Now you can see a lot of information here. Let's break it down to understand better. When, the date and time, when did this event happen? What's the source host? Which port was used? The flow, sorry, outbound, inbound, or local, it could be. What's the destination host? What port was used? You can see, by the way, even we can show you what's the service. The protocol, the engine, in this sense, sensor means IDS. The severity of this signature, of this event, and now you can see what the description of the signature is. A network Trojan was detected. And based on this, we can perform remediation. We can go to that specific host. You can see now it just refreshed. So from this source, somewhere in Israel, external IP, but it's in Israel, to our internal host, that's the destination, and we can analyze and see what's going on there. And of course, mitigate the risk on this specific host in order to prevent these issues. You can perform a lot of filters here. As you can see, I can, let's say I want to remove the sensor, and now I get WMIPI, sorry, malware, you can even including the path to the specific file. You can see here. This, of course, is malware we introduced specifically, intentionally into our lab network. Now you can customize Cybowall a lot to make it more, for your organization, I should say. Let's go over the policy features and then you'll understand. So first of all, you have the various networks that were added. You can decide if you want to whitelist them so they're not scanned. You can, if you want to protect them or not, basically have them continuously scanned and monitored with all the Cybowall engines. Host groups is a cool feature. This allows you to create logical groups and assign hosts to them using this. This allows the admin to manage the hosts inside Cybowall according to the company logic. For example, many organizations using Cybowall like to create groups according to the departments they have there, HR, IT, marketing, and so forth, or according to office locations, Warsaw, Moscow, New York, for example. And then they assign the host to there. This leads to, I could say, ease of use of the system, and the reaction time is also much better, since if something happens in that specific group, the admin can be alerted. Port profiles is what I mentioned earlier, basically a set of ports, a list of ports which are acceptable and allowed by the organization. Anything else, you'll get alerted about this, like I showed you on the wall. You can naturally create your own, just give it a name, any ports you want, TCP or UDP, submit it, and then just assign the hosts you want into that group. Mitigation is important. I mentioned earlier at the beginning that in IDS, its main disadvantage is that it just alerts the admin. So we've been adding mitigation capabilities which you can configure rules for. You can configure multiple rules. If it's on the entire network, on a group, like I showed you a moment ago, or a specific host. Following that, here, let's say choose this one. You can choose multiple ones, of course. What is the event that triggers this action? What is the rule going to do? So sensor, as I mentioned, is IDS. The network traps are honeypots. And the Malware Hunter, did it detect a scan or a download of something that could lead to the malware? Choosing any of these, you can choose actions. The two basic actions we currently have, and we are adding more and more as we go on, is, of course, send an email, immediately alert the admin, or whoever is the designated person to react on this event, or shut down a port. Shut it down locally on a host, shut it down in the switch, shut it down on the honeypot, and as the example shows here. This is a way to immediately block out the hacker, but you need to take into consideration that, of course, you might get yells from the users, hey, I can't use my computer anymore, or something, is stuff like that. But the common practice in the security, let's call it market, is it's better to shut down the port, block the attacker, and have some slight loss of work time rather than being hacked. I agree, by the way. So you can configure there. We're going to add, like I said, more and more capabilities here. I would watch this if I were you. WMI, basically, this allows us to connect to Windows hosts and collect the information we need, in addition to, of course, being able to close ports on the Windows machines and other capabilities. So here is where you put in the WMI credentials, and you can see the list of hosts that are connected with WMI or queried using WMI. Our Malware Hunter also has profiles. You can configure profiles. You can use, the default profiles, which look at specific file extensions or file types in specific locations, as you can see. But you can create your own. Just put in a name. What are the file extensions you want in here? Specific paths or locations to search for. just to give you a tip, it's not recommended to put in C, or the whole entire drive, C drive, because it will simply take a while. We're going to scan every single file there and every single folder and so forth. So C might take a while. It's better to be more specific. And here you can see the host where you can assign a specific profile. The default ones, of course, are, as you probably saw earlier, normal and aggressive, but you can also assign your custom one. Now, IDS is pretty cool. First of all, you have the IDS profiles, as you can see here, but I chose custom because this allows me to play around a bit with the system. First of all, these are popular signatures, the ID and the signature that already exist inside the network. You could see the categories here, see attempted attack, and I could see, ooh, web application attack. These are the signatures. And using this, you can, well, find out what happened, where it happened, and of course why. No, why is a different question, but how it happens, more specific. Now, we have a very robust reporting capability, or reporting system. You get information regarding network events, event timeline, which is, well, customizable. Let's say I just want this, so the date here changed, and I can see all the hosts, of course. Descriptions of, okay, various events, signatures, according to severity, and you get a report according to our engines. Traffic analysis is basically a breakdown of the threat sources. You get this in a graphical manner, or of course you can view a high-level report, you could say, of the events per country. Host analysis gives us information, similar information to the same that we saw on the wall. The details of the hosts are listed here, and you can see the host name, the host IP, the name, operating system, and so forth. This is a breakdown of the types of assets we have in the organization, from printer to Windows to switches and so forth. And you can see the breakdown here, and actually clicking any of these will take us to a more detailed report. Operating system breakdown. Not much more to say here. The WMI events that occurred with a timeline and a list of active hosts. We created these reports to give an easy way to reach the information rather than have the user start filtering out unneeded information. In the vulnerability report, you also can see a breakdown here. If it's according to the severity level, you can see the numbers of vulnerabilities per CVSS score or severity level. Report of the open ports. Let's see. I want to know which one. Yeah, 139. I want to know which are the hosts. You can see there's 16 of them. As you can see also here, that have this port open, not only for well, threat mitigation, but also to know. I didn't know that this host itself had port 139 open, for example. Protection, very similar to what we saw earlier in the risk assessment, or the protection in the host details for a specific host, but here you can see it high level. Antivirus up to date, for example. Firewall is on, perfect, and Windows updates up and running, perfect. We can also see default credentials that are weak if they exist. In this specific environment, we don't have any, which is good. But imagine organizations that allow users to configure their own passwords and don't have a policy that prevents passwords like admin, admin username, admin password, at word1 and all those common passwords, so we can check those and let you know. Software inventory, including the breakdown of vulnerability metrics. For each one, you can see the CVEs that exist there. Clicking on any of them will open this and allow you to access the remediation links and, of course, additional information regarding the vulnerability. For operating system, it's basically the same. By the way, I don't know if you noticed this, but clicking on any of the host names the application names, operating system names, gives you the specific hosts which have this operating system installed on them. And inventory gives us information regarding software. I want to see who has the Google Update Helper. Great, these are the hosts, for example. And one of the latest additions, Active Directory information. We can show you what groups you have, which users are related to each group. For example, administrators, so I have these. Clicking on any of these will show me their membership. Okay. There you go. Now, system settings allows us to configure Cybowall, as opposed to policy, which allows us to customize it to work in a manner that's more good for us as the organization. But here you configure all the technical stuff. Where would the management service, what's the IP for Cybowall and so forth. Sniffer service, if it's using a different, or IDS, if it's using a different interface. The honeypot, you can give it an IP here. The various, here you add the various VLANs or networks you want protected. Default gateway, domain name servers, static routes if you want to, if you can't traverse the gateway and you need to get to a different network, for example, so this is something you can put in here. And, well, switch access, SNMP, put in the community, and this will allow Cybowall to connect to them. Multiple other options here, for example, configuring what you want to receive in alerts or daily reports, or not only daily, but it could be weekly or monthly. And for what engines, what severity level, okay? And of course, if you have a schedule, you can configure a schedule if you want any information to be sent periodically. You can connect Cybowall to, well, Cybowall basically has syslog support, so that's how it can act as a SIEM, collecting or receiving information from additional systems in the organization, or it can send the information to a SIEM, and that way the organization, if they have a SIEM, can continue using that system. Well, data time is pretty straightforward, nothing to say here. Again, for users, network tools allows us to view the ARP table and the system routing table. Informative, basically not anything active here to do. Licensing shows us license information. You can even, well, fill out the information, download the file, and have the information signed in your CA, for example, in your organization, a certificate authority, and then you can upload it again and have Cybowall recognized. And of course, backup if you want to back up the system. So this has been a high-level overview of Cybowall. I'll be happy to receive questions. Where you can send them when we finish the webinar. You'll get the information of how to send questions. Feel free to do so. We like questions. And Nicholas, back to you.
Great. Thank you, Sinon, for the presentation and walkthrough. I hope it was very useful and productive to all those. As mentioned, feel free to ping us with some questions. We will make